I'll be discussing technologies in this video. Technologies in GREET can be the boilers, engines, turbines, or even chemical reactions that calculate the emissions resulting from the inputs used in a process. I'll open the technology editor to show how that works, and then I'll add some new technologies. After inputs have been dragged and dropped into a stationary process, one or more technologies can be dragged and dropped into the inputs to make the GREET process representative of how a resource is used by a process. In fact, at least one technology is needed for the emissions from an input to be counted for a stationary process. Technologies are also used to calculate the emissions for the transportation modes in a transportation process. Many resources have technologies already built for them in GREET, and they can be edited, and new technologies can be created by users by adding emission factors. These emission factors convert a quantity of a particular resource into a quantity of an emission. Technologies is the second option in the Data Editor's menu. When selecting Modify Technology, a menu pops up listing resources and their associated technologies. We can search for a resource of interest or a technology of interest. I'll open the Technologies menu and select the natural gas small industrial boiler as an example. The main feature here is a table reporting emission factors for a series of modeling years. Along the top of the table are the years. A column can be deleted by clicking on the X icon, and a new column can be added by clicking the Add Year button. Down the left of the column are the emissions resulting from the combustion of natural gas by a small industrial boiler. Additional emissions can be added by clicking Add Emission, and a drop-down menu provides a list of potential emissions to add. The quantities are in terms of mass of emission per energy of resource. As an example, let's say our modeling year is 2010, and we want to know how much methane is emitted from a small industrial boiler running on natural gas. In this version of GREET, the quantity happens to be 1.06 grams of methane per 1 million BTUs of natural gas. I can change the units by right-clicking on an emission factor and selecting Change Unit, but just note that in this version of GREET, the units then change for almost all of the emission factors. You may have noticed that the emission factors for SOx and CO2 are in cells shaded gray, and the emission labels are in green. There's a feature in GREET available to users that allows these emission factors to be calculated based on the sulfur ratio and carbon ratio of the resource, as well as some other resource parameters. A message appears explaining that the value can be calculated if I move the cursor over the label for SOx. If I right-click on a SOx or CO2 emission factor, I can change it to a non-calculated value, and the cell changes from gray to yellow. I can always right-click and change it back. At the bottom of the technology editor is the name of the technology and a place for notes. There's also a link to open a list of the existing processes that use this technology. As a demonstration, I'll add a technology used in a gasification process that produces hydrogen from switchgrass. This process already exists in GREET, but I'll recreate it here as an example. To add a new technology in Data Editors, I'll click Technologies, point to Add Technology, then select Regular Technology. A pop-up menu appears prompting me to choose the resource that will be used by the technology, so I'll select switchgrass. Now I have a blank technology frame to fill in, and first I'll name the technology. Before I can do anything else, I have to add a year. If emission factors exist for a specific year, I can enter that year. Since I don't have a specific year for my example, I'm going to enter 0. This way, my emission factors are going to be used for any target simulation year. I could add multiple years to create a time series if I wanted to project some advancements with the technology, but for now, I'll keep it general. Now I have to add emissions. Now that the emissions are all added, I'll fill in the known emission factors. NOx is 1.56 grams per MMBTU. For SOx and CO2, remember that I can fill in the values, or I can just allow GREET to calculate these values based on the sulfur ratio, the carbon ratio, and the sulfur and carbon in the other emissions. I'll go with the second option, so I right-click in the SOx field and select Switch to Calculated Value. And the value is populated and it's 138 grams per MMBTU. I'll do the same for CO2. And the value is 107 kilograms per million BTUs. There's not much more to the technologies feature in GREET, so we'll end here. Thanks for watching, and remember that you can check out our other videos on the GREET Model Tutorial YouTube channel to learn about the other features of GREET.